Forget the stay positive bullshit. You've heard enough of that. Today we're going to talk about what infertility really feels like. If you're new here, I'm Brittany, this is Nick, and we've been exactly where you are. The tests, the appointments, the emotional roller coaster.
Shots? You forgot the shots?
Shots.
So many shots.
Everything. Everything. It was a long road to get here. At the time, we had zero guidance for what was to come or how to prepare. So that's why we're here. To make things a little bit easier on you, we will be your unofficial guides on this crazy wild ride called infertility.
I like that. It feels like we're at Cedar Point. Welcome to the roller coaster. Depending on where you are in your infertility journey, you've probably already encountered kind of our favorite topic, the toxic positivity. You know, everyone like, stay positive, or it's all in the plan, or this is happening for a reason. Fuck that. Like, honestly, the worst part of infertility. And I know people probably mean well, but after the 10th time someone says it to you, you're like, no, just get away from me.
Temperate.
Yeah. So in honor of that, we are going to talk not about staying positive. We know this journey sucks and nobody wants to be a part of it. We're going to talk about the things that nobody else talks about. And that's kind of like, what is it actually like to go through infertility?
The first thing that you don't discover until you're kind of in the thick of it is the diagnosis process is not straightforward at all. Like, you sometimes see on TV, or like you have this vision in your head that you're sitting in this doctor's office and all of a sudden they deliver the news, you have infertility and here's the explanation why. And the reality of it is that it goes nothing like that. You have your first appointment, you talk a little bit about, like, you know, your history and things like that, and then you have a billion tests that you have to do before you get any answers, if you get answers at all. In my case, I was lumped into this unexplained infertility category, which is basically like they don't know what the hell is wrong with you, so they just call it unexplained infertility.
Yeah, it's kind of a gray area, right? Like, you expect, like, oh, la-ti-da, we're doing this, to, oh, the doctor's coming in and you're not having kids ever. And it's just like, you kind of like slowly find yourself in it, right? It's kind of a weird, sneaky uppy thing.
So not only do you have the long diagnosis process, but there's also a ton of emotions that go into it. Sometimes you think it might be easier just to have an answer, because then I can come up with what the solution might be. And when you don't have an answer, that can lead to additional stress and uncertainty. Those things, particularly in my case, as I'm not somebody who loves uncertainty, can be very anxiety inducing. So not only are you kind of dealing with like all of these appointments and tests you have to go through, but then you have this like mental load on the other side too.
You're not selling this well.
I will say that the one great thing though that you kind of learn as you're involved more in the infertility process is that there's always that level of hope that your, you know, whatever your condition is will be treatable, because this science just gets better and better over time, which is totally true. It does. So for a lot of people, you don't even need to go all the way to IVF.
Yeah, that's something we experienced firsthand, right? From our first cycle all the way, you know, like what, 10 years almost later, like the changes were insane.
And one more thing on the diagnosis while we're on the subject. The medical jargon that you encounter when you first start this fertility journey is also something you don't really plan for. It's like they just throw all these acronyms at you, and you have, you know, it's like you have to like create an encyclopedia to like remember what everything means and, you know, what you should be doing, because there's just like IUI and like AMH, and I don't even know if that's a thing, but yeah, there's so many. So it can be overwhelming at first, for sure.
But then it feels like you went to med school. Typically, you're so focused on the medical side of things, like the available treatments and the doctor's appointments and the tests and all that, and you kind of put the social piece of it to the side. And that's one thing that if we could go back and change anything about our experience, it would be focus on that a little bit more. It's not that we neglected it, but it certainly, that took a back seat. And I think we could have probably done a better job of that one, right? Yeah, one thing we didn't really kind of plan for is we were on kind of two different timelines in our heads, but neither of us knew it. We were like, well, we want to have kids, but like, how fast do you want to do it? How much money do you want to spend when you're getting ready to do it? How much time and effort and trying to find a doctor and all of the other stuff? Like, until you explicitly state it, your partner has no idea what you're thinking and vice versa. And that did cause a little bit of friction, I think, until we finally were like, hold up, what's your thoughts on this particular topic right now? And then we really talked it through, and it was wildly helpful.
Yeah, sometimes like when you first start trying to conceive, it's like, yeah, sure, you're both aligned because it's easy at that point. But when you get into like, oh, we might have to do this or we might have to do that, and there's medication and there's side effects and there's all these things, your opinions and your approaches, they might be different. In many cases they are. And you know, like for us, we had to talk about it and then we got all lined up eventually. But it's those discussions and communication that's really important, because you are really only thinking about, hey, we both want to have a baby. But then like when you're in infertility, there's all these other spider webs that add a little bit of complication to it.
And then just beyond your partner, right? You have the whole rest of the world and all of your relationships. Generally, when you're in baby making mode, your social circle is probably somewhere right around there, or maybe they have small kids, or maybe you have weddings that you're going to. But everyone knows the feeling of getting a baby shower invite from somebody who's just over the moon. Like, look, happy for them. That's great. That's wonderful. But I don't need to see that right now. I don't need to participate. I don't want to participate. You're happy for them. That's fine, right? You can feel all the different feelings there. But man, that was a weird one, to be mad at your friend for doing the thing that you're trying to do, and then you start feeling guilty about it. So a few tips here on this particular piece. I think we already talked about one, but just do yourself a favor and have an honest conversation with your partner. It might be a little weird, like, hey, are you really into this IVF thing? But like, no judgment here. Like, I want to have this conversation because, you know, if you're not, you're not. And we need to talk about getting steps there or whatever. Also, it's okay to say, no, thank you. I'm going to send a lovely gift for your baby shower, but I just do not need to be there right now raining on your parade. Very happy for you, but I'm going to sit this one out. These conversations can feel like they're going to be messy to start, but I promise you, once you start them, it'll feel much, much, much better. And you'll regret not doing it sooner.
Mm-hmm. Such is our case. Yeah. When we finally told people, it was like so freeing.
And the last tip, and this one feels obvious, everyone always says it, but set boundaries. You're allowed to feel how you want to feel. And especially, you know, you always have that one person in your life who has to give you all of the advice, and it's usually wrong. You can tell them to step off a little bit on that one. Just, I don't need that in my life.
Yeah, to everyone who's watching this video that we know is like,
is that me?
Is that, am I the one?
If you have to ask,
it's you. So we talked about kind of the process of getting diagnosed. And then there's the process that you go through with treatments. So this is more of like the reality of your treatments. There's the obvious financial implications. However, it is much more complicated than just how much does IVF cost? How much is an IUI? When you're trying to make these decisions, typically it will go something like, you can try IUI and see if that works, and if that doesn't work, then you can try IVF. But then in your head, you're playing out all these scenarios when it comes to finances, and it's like, okay, I could try 6 IUI cycles, but that might be the same price as like 1 IVF. So should I just jump right to IVF? But what if the IUI would have worked the first time? Then I could have got it for the IUI price, not spend all that money on IVF. And you see where this, like, it really just like...
I'm having flashbacks here.
It's like you're like Einstein on the whiteboard trying to figure out like what the best approach is. And so most of the time, like, you just hear like, this is how much it costs, but they don't factor in all these other like decisions you have to make.
I wish there was like some sort of an algorithm that would say like, here's your best success rate based on, but unfortunately insurance companies kind of jump in there on that one. Mm-hmm. Our doctor was even like, you're not going to get an IUI to work with how your body works, but I have to do 6 of them to get them to pay for IVF.
Your doctor is obviously the best resource, and they can provide you some guidance on like what the odds of this working would be, so like, should you try this first? Should you go to this? So that's kind of like how we approached it. And don't be afraid to ask those questions when you go into all your appointments, because that's really how you're going to figure this out the best.
Be your own advocate.
Mm-hmm. Along with the financial implications, there's also time commitment, because all of these tests, appointments, procedures, everything, before you know it, your calendar is just filled with infertility stuff. So there's that. And then there's also the kind of like physical side of this, which is something I think I personally didn't really think about when we started this journey. I was just so focused on I'll do whatever it takes to get a baby. And then when you're in the thick of it, it's like you kind of see like there's all of these side effects you can get from different medications, and you might have to try different medications to see what works. And so that's something, if you kind of anticipate ahead of time, you might set yourself up for knowing, what it's going to be like, and make sure that you have a good self-care routine in place, because that is key, my friend. A couple tips for this phase of the infertility journey. One is to do your research in advance on all of the financial situation, because not only is there a decision-making element, but there are different options available out there, and it's constantly changing. There's shared risk programs, there's payment plans. You can kind of do all this research before you even get to that step. So if you do end up having to choose between multiple treatments, you already have an idea of where you stand with your finances.
And most clinics have financial counselors, so you can actually like talk them through. They'll run insurance background and all that stuff. So like use the clinic for everything that they do. You're paying for it anyway.
Also, find a coach, a therapist, a friend, a support group, whoever you need to that kind of understands this process, or that you can bounce ideas off of, because it's going to help you rather than like mentally walking through all of these scenarios in your head. And the last thing I already kind of touched on, but make sure you figure out what your self-care looks like early on, whether that is yoga, a warm bath, exercise, journaling, whatever it is.
Well, it's storming out here, and something just blew.
Noise. Figure out what it is for you, and just make sure you have something in place, because you will need it or you will want it. And just give yourself grace throughout this whole process. Be kind to yourself. That's something we should all be doing anyway, but especially through something as hard as infertility.
Just remember, your emotions aren't linear in this. There is no prescribed way that you're going to feel throughout this whole thing. It is, I think Brittany said earlier, a roller coaster. There's highs and lows, and holy shit, they follow each other so fast. I mean, I can remember when we were doing IUI days and like getting downtown Chicago feeling like, okay, this is the one, it's going to work. We had good scans. We do our thing. We go out to breakfast. It's great. Come back home to Facebook and somebody announced a pregnancy, and woo, go you, I'm feeling positive. And then 3 days later you check, and even though you're not supposed to, and it's a negative test, and all that blows. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, well, now I still have to pay for that IUI. And then, oh my God, it goes up and down and up and down. And then after IUIs, you're like, okay, now we're going to IVF. This can't not be successful. Until they cancel your cycle in the middle, and then you have to start all over, and it's just...
it's like just as I feel like for everybody, it's still a zigzag all over the place, no matter what your journey ends up looking like.
Just kind of a final piece on that is, remember, it's not all just about the baby, right? You're not just trying to get pregnant, and then that's that. You wash your hands of this. This affects all areas of your life. So feel how you're going to feel. It's okay. It's all legitimate.
I read a headline this morning that said people with infertility like carry the anxiety more like throughout the rest of their life, even if you have a successful attempt, or you know what I mean?
You're practicing that habit for years.
Yeah. So it's wild that it can like just this one point in your life can kind of like trickle in afterward, even if you have success with it. That's why like these foundations of like positive, healthy mental health activities, approaches are like so important.
Now I'm thinking that I have like PTSD and fertility.
I have anxiety, so it's true for me, but I feel like that was before infertility too. So, all right. So the last one that, again, you don't really think about until you're like right there with infertility is sort of like the body image infertility crisis that you go through, because you start off with kind of, why is my body not working? Like, this is something that it should naturally do. Why is it not working for me? Like, this is a human bodily function and it should just work appropriately. You're already mad at your body. And then there's some politics and religion that kind of comes into play, where people maybe tell you what they think you should be doing, or they frown upon like infertility treatments. And that part is also really exhausting, because you already feel shitty and now you feel even shittier. So like, that's just something you have to kind of like prepare yourself for, unfortunately, in this landscape that we live in. If you are in America, if you are in other countries, I don't necessarily know, but probably everybody is kind of in a similar boat. Oh, and then like, you'll also read things like randomly, and you like notice it more when you're going through this, and it'll be like, you know, if you can't get pregnant, it's just meant to be. And like, that crap sucks to read. And that also like changes how you feel and like how you think about yourself. And so you really have to like, again, like as we discussed, like this is where like really good mental health comes in, because you have to be able to push all of that garbage aside. And like, those people don't know what they're talking about. They've never been through it. Like, you just have to be able to ignore people, as hard as it can be sometimes. But the good news here is that through all of these like changes to like how you see yourself, there are some positive things that can come out of it too. Like for me, and I think for you too, like we became much more vulnerable and open, and like we share more and we're just more like authentic. And so I think like going through something like this, not only like are there these crappy things, but there's also positive things that come out of it, and how you see yourself as like this different person.
Goddamn superhero.
But it's like you are tapping into strength that you never knew that you ever had, and you become so resilient as a person. And so sure, we'd rather not have to go through it, but if you have to, that is a major plus, is that like you are going to come out super strong at the end of it.
Infertility is bullshit. It's not fair.
Good takeaway.
Right? It sucks. But you're not alone. 1 in 8 people experience it. So chances are you know somebody who has gone through it, is going through it, whatever. Find your people. And, you know, we are working on, like, we have Facebook groups and our YouTube channel, comments down there. Y'all can connect. There's also a lot of support stuff through most clinics. So find a person. Find a group of people.
Especially if you're just starting out, maybe you were just recently diagnosed. Like, this is like foundational to like the whole rest of what's to come.
So you do the like, the subscribe, come back for more content like this.
Okay, bye.
Bye.